So, let me probably introduce myself again. My name is Olga Simson. I am Doctor of Law, professor of a famous law university in Kharkiv, and in 2016 I also founded a company that specializes exactly in IT and creative industry. Our company is called the Institute of Law, Technology and Innovation, and we are a provider of legal services and educational programs for IT and creative industries. I have experience of probably more than 15 years in supporting projects in creative industries. I have a lot of work in various legislative groups, legislative activity, work with international organizations, work in grant projects. So here are such flying balls which are around me, and they can be called my main projects, some of which have already been transformed into businesses. That is how my institute has been functioning since 2016. And then a famous project. Accordingly, there is a Facebook page. I invite you. This is Creative Law Studios, which actually initiated this lecture. This is a project that is fully dedicated to the promotion of intellectual property rights among creative industries. And we launched this last year with the support of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. And this year we won the grant again, so expect this project to be continued in the nearest future, already as an international one, with the involvement of experts from the UK and the USA. And we will not conduct it as Creative Law Studios, which means to improve the literacy of representatives of creative industries in intellectual property issues in general, but we will conduct in-depth programs for individual specializations. This is art law. We will even have an invited specialist from the Sotheby's Institute of Art. We will have a fashion law program and IT and media law programs. All of them are interdisciplinary at the intersection of law, technology, art, so the way I like, and always try it not to get stuck on, strictly speaking, legal topics, because I think that law still follows some events. Anyway, what happens in society is primary. How technologies develop, how science and art develop, the market gets formed. So jurisprudence, norms and legal regulation come to the rescue only after the formation of economic relations on the market, already at the very end. So the law is always late, and it's getting later enough every year, probably more and more, because the speed of development is actually gaining momentum, and the law simply does not have time, in fact. And this is a disease not only of Ukraine, but as a whole. If we talk about service in the technological sphere. And today we will talk about the intersection of art and technology. The world also lags far behind, I want to tell you. And we will talk about it today and see the stages of development. How they occurred, how they intersect, and how the law responded to certain challenges. And finally, I'm doing a very interesting project now. It is not just a project, it's a startup, a platform for digital art. And I came into this sphere for a reason. Namely because I already had experience and for a long time studied the development and impact of technologies, digital technologies, information technology in art, how it changed, and again, how intellectual property law, copyright, reacted to the processes and responded to them. But today we will try to talk about it, although when I was preparing for the lecture, I will tell you honestly, I realized that it's probably impossible to meet just in one lecture. There are a lot of questions, an insane amount, and there are definitely specifics. A lot of new areas have arisen that did not exist before, and at some point we said that the same problems that were in the real world would be transferred to the virtual world. But completely new types of relationships have arisen, and new art simply didn't exist before. Which is why it's natural that, let's say, the regulators were late, and only now we are slowly starting to come to the conclusion that these norms are already being introduced in legislative acts, directives, international treaties, and this area is starting to be regulated. So, what we will talk about today, despite the fact that the topic was announced and a large list of issues, of course, when I began to prepare for the lecture, they have partially changed, although they will all be covered today. But I would like it to be interesting to everyone, not only the lawyers who joined, but also people from the art world. Because first of all, the questions, which we had as lawyers, were related mostly to how it developed, and until you understand how it developed and track how it happened in practice, you won't understand the essence of things. That is, these norms will be absolutely abstract, and just a little will be understood. Therefore, today we will talk about periods of digitalization, the same called art, how it came, in what way, about the genres of digital art, which is also important for us to understand in order to select the necessary legal mechanisms, about certain signals in the digital art market that have occurred and started to grow literally at an incredible pace in recent years. And of course, we will talk about copyright and other legal issues of digital art, because I promise you that today it will not be only about the copyright, but also about other areas of law. And we will try to give some predictions on the future development of the art market. And again, what we will have in our legislation in the nearest future. Because, well, probably a few years ago, when I just started my activity, it was completely impossible to imagine that artificial intelligence would paint. And then it became real. And later these works were already sold at world auctions. Respectively, to sell them, one could not consider them as a digital asset. And considering the right of ownership, the transfer, respectively, of the right of ownership to this art, which give rise to a lot of following legal problems and precedents. And here we will talk about this today. So, we start the thought with you before the digital period. I call it typewriter art. Although, of course, before the digital period, named as a period before the introduction of computers, these were the other devices with which people created art. But what is the trick? The fact is that for the first time a person began to use some technical means to create their artworks. That is, roughly speaking, the print of paper that arose was created not by the artist, but by this very device. So, the first surviving example of the typewriter art, it was such a wonderful picture, which was published in the Pitman's Phonetic Journal. This is a picture of a butterfly that was typed by a typist, Flora Stacy. Nothing more is known about it. But if we look at the history of digital art, how the classics of this genre describe it, we start with this work. This is the only one preserved in its original form. And in fact, this butterfly consists of brackets, hyphens, dots, strokes, and so on. So, in fact, by that apparatus of symbols that was obtained using a typewriter. Then a famous story. This time it was a young man, also a typist, who created his paintings by using a typewriter. You see that there were mainly portraits. George Washington is represented here. And in fact, he drew a sketch with a pencil, then filled the sketch with various symbols to get hatching and contours. Then, with the help of carbon paper, he transferred the image to a graph paper, copied it onto a black sheet of paper, and thereby got this picture. He was a portrait painter who was already mentioned in newspapers. And that was in 1939. In fact, the art that we are talking about now is a forerunner of the computer art, which arose a bit later and had the abbreviation ASCII. And this art is considered to be the first created by using a computer and exploits the symbol system that was available to the first computer. But we will talk about that later. And now here is another work that has already joined the Museum of Modern Art. In the 60s, the Bell Laboratory, a well-known one that had a huge impact on computer art in general, began to be engaged in computer art. Lots of graphics came out from there, and two we can call them artists Leon Harmon and Ken Norton. In 1967, in the office of his colleague, they made such a mural on the wall in large font from the fonts of a naked lion woman. Since his colleague was on the business trip, when he returned, he saw this portrait and was stunned. It was removed, but someone managed to take a photo, and it got in the New York Times. And later, this art, developed with the help of an electronic computer machine from IBM, became such a mainstream, and actually the first such computer art joined the museum, the world-renowned museum. Further, the first digital artworks were created even before the introduction of the personal computer by other devices, such as an oscilloscope. And here you see the paintings of Ben Lapolsky. In general, I want to tell you that, of course, the first creators of such artworks were not artists. They were people with a technical background. Engineers who came to art, probably by the voice of their heart, internal state, and of course, they themselves were closer to science, closer to technology. And art was not their native element, but nevertheless, they created such amazing artworks using the displays of the electric signal forms. Moreover, as a rule, they are called non-originally. It is just an oscillon, consonant with the oscilloscope itself, with the help of which these artworks were created. At first, they were black and white, then colored. Just these images of an electric signal were photographed for a long time, and these amazing works were composed subsequently. That allowed us to admire them even decades later. So, another wonderful device, as it belongs to the era before the digital art, is a pen plotter. And here it's interesting, it is probably a derivative work. Also, of course, here the artist was most likely inspired by the work of another artist, but even in the title of the artwork by Frieder Nake, which was used with the help of this plotter, is actually a computer-controlled device using hatching, a pencil or a pen, so as to say it produced certain strokes. Thus, he tried to repeat the work of Paul Klee, high roads and by roads. Actually, your opinion is very interesting to me. You can write as you think whether there is a derivative work or not. And then I will read with pleasure during the break about your opinions. So, do you think there is a derivative work here, or that the artist was simply inspired by the work of another author? And we go further. This period, in fact, it's apogee, is the creation of a group, which was abbreviated as EAT, which means Experiments in Art and Technology. And these people, 10 artists and 30 IT specialists, as we would say now, these were engineers conducting experiments in art and technology. In 1967, on the basis of the well-known Bell Telephone Laboratories, this group was formed. And well, the most famous artwork that we could now call an installation was the Pepsi Pavilion, which was presented at the Expo 70 in Osaka, in Japan, and embodied all the possible technologies that were at the time. There was a dome, there were internal installations that, with the help of light, immersed viewers in three-dimensional images generated by mirror reflections. And all this was accompanied by electronic music, which invited the visitor to individually participate in this collective experience. It was the first interactive on such a wide scale. And we can say that after this work, this period, which we can characterize from certain points of view, ends. Well, firstly, if we are talking about art during this period, and of course we still do not call it digital, but nevertheless this is art, created by using certain technologies, 100%. Access to these technologies was very limited. Why? Because special devices were used, they were very large scale, huge electronic computers were extremely expensive, and naturally, who could afford it? Only research laboratories, universities, large corporations. So we can say that art was not massive at this stage. Therefore, it was always born in these laboratories. And the first to start using all these devices to create art were scientists, mathematicians, engineers, not artists at all. Therefore, it was a period of art for the elite. These people could be counted on the fingers. And of course, let's say, the development of this direction has not had a significant impact on the economy and law yet. What happens to the rights during this period? So we do not even have special legislation. That is, let's say, in its modern interpretation, existing at the time. But of course, the first copyright law was adopted in the United States of America. It laid a foundation for a modern understanding of copyright, but nevertheless, a lot of things differed, For instance, the term of copyright was then 28 years, with the possibility of extending it for another term. And thus, the maximum term of protection for the period was 56 years. This is only in case of extension. So, then for the first time, cases arose. Well, firstly, the Townsend Amendment of 1912 is noted, which allowed to protect even audiovisual works. That is, the works which included the visuals, the text, the music, and there were several much publicized cases. The first case, I apologize, there is a mistake here, was in 1914. It was an authorized performance of music. It was the first time a lawsuit when music was performed in a restaurant without permission. And the lawsuit was filed and won. Since then, in general, nothing has changed. Now, all the music in catering organizations must also be used under the license. But this was the first time. In general, I want to tell you that music was probably the first field of arts which classically set an example for the very relations that we are discussing today. This is the protection of copyright, regulation, and further this was happening in music too. Art always was late. Since the production of films, sphere of game dev joined. Here in 2020, we are discussing such problems with you, because the market and the digital art market are probably starting to form. We are getting mechanisms, and in general, people are thinking about how to protect their rights. Well, the Pushman versus the New York Graphic Society case is also very interesting. At that time, with the transfer of the material object of the picture, there or some other image, copyright was automatically transferred as well, unless otherwise provided by the agreement. That is, now we have the opposite doctrine, and then in 1940 there was exactly the case connected with a copy of the work. It existed in a single copy, and the court decided that the copyright is transferred with the copy if it is not withheld by the author. And only in 1976 everything was settled exactly the opposite way. And it is now that we know the well-known message of copyright, that it is not automatically transferred with the transfer of a material object, a copy of an author's work, but it remains with the author. That is, the presumption of copyright, property right of the author, such an interesting point. And so we move on to the second stage, the emergence of computer art. Generally, from the stage that we now call digital art begins to emerge, that is the introduction of personal computers providers, and new opportunities for the wider spread of this art. By the 70s, a number of artists had already begun to learn programming, and the first schools appeared. Here is the artwork by Paul Brown, who studied at Slade. It was a school at the University of London, which taught computer techniques in art. This direction was very interesting. And exactly Paul Brown was the first who began to use a computer to create so-called generative art by using the green algorithm. Certain prints multiplied and created such a title effect. This technique was later used by other artists, but he's considered to be the founder. And generally, the Slade School of Art at the University of London created what was later called the Experimental Computing Department, which was engaged in integration of the computer technology into art and taught artist programming. This was a part of the curriculum for the first time. Well, generally, Paul Brown was the first to develop a tile-based image generation system. Further, a very interesting example too. Now we would say that such works can hardly be protected by copyright. But nevertheless, John Whitney is to your attention. He came from the audiovisual sphere, created his own motion graphics program, and also his own company, which used technologies and the computer of his own assembly, we may say for commercials. And with the help of a mathematical function, he created the picture over here. First they were black and white, then in color, and this device was called a catalog. In 1966, IBM awarded him the status of a resident artist, and then in the 70s he already opened his Los Angeles school and was engaged in what is called psychedelic art. We may say that during this period, generally, the forerunners of the future genres of digital arts are laid. As an example of generative art, computer-generated art, was a program called Aaron, and it was used for this. It was created by computer engineers in the 80s. It was a robotic machine that created such an amazing artwork on large sheets. And Harold Cohen, generally an artist who is working in the genre up to the present time. Here you can see the work of 2004, not so long ago, which was created at the intersection of computer art, namely the art of artificial intelligence, which at the time attracted great attention from museums and galleries and was something completely new. Again, these are the abstractions and colors that belong to the genre of generative art. His work can be seen here at your service. His exhibitions were held, and a lot of museums exhibited his artworks. You can simply read the information about him on the internet. This is already the more famous artist, Andy Warhol here, who in general is a modern artist who worked in the traditional genres. And in the 80s, representatives of the Commodore Amiga company engaged him to promote, advertise the Amiga 1000 computer by creating his digital artworks. He created 28 of them. But something unexpected happened, and these artworks were lost. His digital experiments stored on a floppy disk were lost until 2014. And in 2014, the artist Cory Arcangel, in collaboration with the Warhol Museum and Carnegie Mellon University computer clubs, restored some of the files. You see the third eye, the birth of Venus. She received a third eye by Andy Warhol. And in general, Andy Warhol very often resorted to the artworks of other artists, and not only artists but also photographers. He was often accused of plagiarism. There were several lawsuits that he lost, by the way. They do not concern digital art, but nevertheless. In general, computer artists, when the trend in art appeared, even a new concept of proprietary art appeared. They were against the spread of monopoly rights to art because they often used the art of other authors. Nevertheless, they very often suffered defeats in the courts, received lawsuits. And it all depended on whether there was a commercial use or not. Because the doctrine of fair use in America, one of its criteria is the purpose it was used with. And since Warhol was a very commercially successful artist, then in fact the main demands were to him. He usually paid for the damage. There were several well-known cases with his participation. Therefore, here we have 100% derivative work. It is another matter that the author died long ago, so Warhol had every right to experiment with Botticelli's artwork and create its computer version. A computer version of The Birth of Venus by Botticelli from Warhol, which received the third eye. Also, his famous tin can was still created in such primitivism. Several works were also found, but unfortunately about half was restored. By the 90s, digital art is beginning to gain momentum. Why? Because special programs are introduced. These are programs that are well known to all illustrators, graphic artists and designers. These are the Illustrator and Photoshop. It was their applications that gave a strong impetus to what is called digital art, and it has become widespread. And here it's also interesting, but where is the line? It is often asked to where the line between art and design is, because in fact it's sometimes very difficult to determine in general what we are dealing with. That is the same thing can be called commercial design and, for example, art. But nevertheless, it is believed that art is a genre, is a creation of artworks with inspiration and not by commission. Although, of course, there are also certain exceptions from this rule. We know that a commission is acceptable in art, but nevertheless, a design is something that is made to order for commercial purposes. Here you see the artwork created by using the technologies of these programs. Walker is an author of this abstraction, and I want to say that also this trend, when techies are engaged in digital art, is living during this period. Artists come directly there, that is, artists begin to master computer art, technology, programs, and begin to work in the genre. Thus, if we characterize the period of the 70s and 80s, then of course we are talking about the introduction of personal computers. Artists who work with special programs come into digital art directly. Accordingly, these programs are emerging, digital art genres are beginning to take shape, which are canonized later, and now we have a palette of these genres. We will talk about it a bit later. Well, the term generative art appears, that is, art created by artificial intelligence or technology. Certain programs where a person plays a role, but nevertheless, without these programs, without these technologies, it would be impossible to create this art. Although, again, you may argue about it and talk about it, but nonetheless. And here, accordingly, we can already reflect on the question whether a person can be considered its author. If artificial intelligence or a machine, technology, computer program creates this art. Let us leave this question unanswered for now, because at the time he did not receive an answer too. What happens with rights in this period? I must say that this period was very rich in all sorts of norms, treaties, conventions, laws related to copyright regulation, because probably during this period of time, in general, we already have a rather large concentration of the development of science, technology, and art. So a convention is being adopted to create a World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, which now plays a large role in the global release of the game on the market. In 1967, the adoption of this convention takes place, then the USSR joins it in 1973. Around the same time, in 1976, a new edition was adopted, the modern edition of the copyright, which simply underwent certain amendments later. The term of copyright protection was increased significantly, up to 50 years after the author's death. And here the doctrine just finds its embodiment, which says that with the transfer of ownership of a thing, namely to some kind of an art object, particular artwork is embodied, the copyrights to this work do not transfer. That is, we understand that copyright to an artwork and ownership of the object in which it is embodied are two different things and does not depend on one another. The same mechanism applies to literary works and music and so on. That is, copyright does not transfer with the transfer of the tangible medium of the original. All jurisdictions, whether Anglo-American or European, accept this presumption. Well, during this period, which is very important, the fair use doctrine is being laid in America. It was before, but it is a new law where it receives legal recognition. This is the doctrine of fair use. What does it mean? This means that certain criteria were described that made it possible to determine whether it was a free use or not in a particular case. They were determined by the courts on the basis of precedents, and in fact, for example, we have this free use, which does not require permission and a license. It also exists and is also laid down in the legislation, but is called differently and is defined slightly differently too. But nevertheless, we have it exactly in common, that is, in which case the use of the copyright of another person will not be in the nature of a violation. This is the doctrine of fair use. And of course, the climax is the adoption of amendments, according to which copyright began to apply to computer programs and databases, that is, to technological objects. And it's absolutely the same scope of rights as the one that arises from work of literature, arts, and so on. This may sound kind of strange, but nevertheless, the world hasn't figured out anything better than extending this legal regime to technological objects. There was a dispute between producers of the programs and their creators. Producers won, but nevertheless. We differ from the United States, where there is a wider scope of opportunities to register copyrights. In European jurisdiction and in our country, a computer program is only an object of copyright. That is, they are most often not patentable, only if they are inextricably linked with a specific technical device. material object. But this is not the topic of this lecture, so we will not delve into it. So we pass to the third stage, directly the stage of digital art, which is of course most interesting for us. Now we will talk about the genres of the digital art. And despite all their diversity, the genres of digital art can be counted up to 4 to 6 groups. In fact, there is an even more extensive list of subgenres in each group, so as to say, even of such currents and trends in art. But in general, classics of the study of digital art usually distinguish static digital art. That is, in fact, this is any static object created by using digital technologies, pictures, photographs, also sculptures, objects of monumental painting, but created by using digital technologies. Static electronic images that actually mimic the artist's traditional tools, and this entire toolkit goes into digital. Well, there are 2 examples here in order to demonstrate them to you. On the right is the photo manipulation, and on the left is digital painting as the examples of this art. The next genre is the so-called time-based art. All those objects that have both physical and temporal dimensions, and can of course include GIFs, videos, and files, and audios, and films, and slides, and other forms of technological art, including installations. Now I will try to play it so that you can see what the installation is. Such works are done over the years. Here you can see the time period. And it was a group of artists who worked on this amazing creation. You can just blow on the dandelions and they will fly apart. There are actually many such examples. Here you can also attribute 3D video. And from my last personal experience, it was an exhibition of Marchuk, Ivan Marchuk. There was a 3D video, also animated with his artworks, which were digitized and animated. And this was a 3D video, like you are inside, and it is projected onto all walls, ceiling and floor around you by means of projector, and a full feeling of immersion is created, of course. Amazing experience. I think, of course, someone may not agree with me, but to me, traditional art is inferior to digital in terms of interactivity. So now we may move on. Cross-reality art. It is an art that consists entirely of the digital experience of virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Here we are talking about things that do not materialize at all. They exist only in the electronic virtual world, and they either complement our reality, like this cute cow's companion, or they are put on like a mask. This is the first virtual fashion, a dress that is worn on the model in augmented reality mode. And such objects are also created, and even there were questions I had, to which I will move on a bit later, about this particular genre of art. Well, of course, virtual reality, which requires, again, if we are talking about virtual reality, it can be an imitation or 3D videos that do not require special glasses, and of course an art that you can watch and get this interaction experience by wearing virtual glasses. Further, a new direction that emerges after 2000s is gaining momentum. This is game art or avatar art. The development of design styles for computer games and avatars. And here I can say that the roads are still a little bit diverged. That is, for example, game art and avatar art are a separate area in general. They are more related to game development, more related to commerce, to design. And therefore, there are special platforms that are dedicated solely to this art. And they are completely different. Here is one of them. It is called ArtStation. Then another platform was created, which was called ScarUp. We will also discuss them later today. And these are the platforms that were originally more in the field of game. Also again in the 90s and 2000s. The world of games began to actively come to art because films are created, like a well-known Avatar movie. So in general, this art comes into production of films. In the same way, the style is inherited by many artists, so this line is actually sometimes difficult to trace. These are artworks that are in the style and are positioned as art too. In fact, it all depends on how the artist defines himself, or it is sold as content for industry or production. Even often the artists themselves are anonymous, that is, they may not be anonymous for the platform, but they are more often positioned as a brand. There is a copyright icon, but still. Another amazing genre that belongs to the digital art is net art. What do you think it has to do with? Of course, with the invention of the internet and its widespread use. It is an art that is created on the web, and as a result, there is even a trend of art, which is called webism. And Chris Wood is a representative of this trend. He describes his creative work as what he sees in dreams. It is his travel experience transferred to the feeling of dreaming. Therefore, the works are refracted through kind of crystals. His artworks are also publicly available. You can have a look if you want. A very interesting, amazing genre. And we will also discuss later why this genre in particular is very adaptable to digital rights. That is, intellectual property rights, copyrights, which arise for digital works. It is always not so difficult to prove the author in a web work. There are tools that allow you to trace this way of creation because it is created through the network. Good, we can go on. Again, a very beautiful genre. It's up to your choice, up to your taste, but nevertheless. This is the genre that I spoke about at the beginning. It goes down the path from the art of a typewriter, when there were symbols known as, for example, Morse code. Then, of course, we come to the wider range of symbols that you saw here on that naked line woman. And finally, with the invention of the computer, ASCII emerged, which is abbreviated as American Standard of Information Interchange. In fact, this is a set of characters In total, there were 224 printed characters and 16 in the later interpretations of it. ANCI art on the right has already 16 colors. That is, the color appears. We support certain drivers that were used in the DOS system. These two genres have survived up to this day. Often, emoticons can be attributed to this. It is a genre that gave birth to our modern emojis. Naturally, with the development of messengers and social networks, the character set grew, but the logic of the genre, this art, can still be traced. It is a little primitive, also connected somewhere with a game, form of presentation. And on the left you can see a stunning example when a group of artists, programmers, worked within transformation of Star Wars into this form of art for a long time. That is, it was a direction that actually animated Star Wars with the help of this system of symbols, and you can also find it on the internet and have a look. By the way, there is a site, access is limited and you cannot download it, but of course the hackers succeeded. There are already video versions, different video versions of this creation, including those with musical backgrounds. The work went on for years, and there was such an interesting project when a group of artists worked on certain fragments of this film, which lasts 18 minutes. Well, as a conclusion of this part, we will talk about the transition, the threshold of the 90s to 2000s. And on the one hand, there is a rapid development of information technology. The internet is emerging and it's finding ways into all spheres of life. The first networks for art are emerging respectively. The first, already a professional network, appeared in 1989. It's ArtNet, and we will talk about it a bit later. The arsenal of art and software is also growing, which allows the use of computer technology, tablets, styluses, and other tools to create art. Somewhere it was in the traditional genre, somewhere in a completely new one. That is, for example, the improvement of digital technology. It has already allowed uploading videos to computers, and the artist has allowed monetizing these videos. Already, video art and time-based or digital art arrived. So during this period, we can for sure say that a complete overview of multifaceted digital art has already formed, which has already made it possible to systematize it and accordingly determine its terminology. Before we look at what happened in legal reality, we will define digital art. This is also a very important task before we go directly to how legal mechanisms work. We must understand what digital art is. We can divide it into two types. Although, again, there are scientists who believe that digitalization, digitization, and digital art are one and the same. But still, in my point of view, the separation is very important. This is a digital art that is converted by digitizing traditional art and transferring it into a file. When there is a traditional object, it can be a picture, photograph, engraving, sculpture, and so on, which are digitized and turned into digital art. This is also a large part of digital art. For example, as a result, prints of certain works of art may occur, which also becomes an object for sale on the market. And the second part of digital art, when it is using technology and the new essence of digital art, that it's and I'm now showing you the terminology that is more accepted in the artistic environment than in the legal one. Therefore, just the first category is called digital art, and the second category is often called new media. Although, in fact, many people still consider these two concepts as a synonym, but nevertheless, serious studies differentiate these two directions, these two kinds of digital art. We will talk later about the importance of these followers. Well, what happens with rights during this period? And if a violation is revealed, then the responsibility at that moment was placed on the owner, and not with a provider or intermediary, which in general greatly influenced the development of digital art platforms, which became very widespread at the same time. Also, during this period, we are dealing with some loud cases. They were not related to the field of art. They were related to books. It was a high-profile case against copying, bypassing just with the help of technical means, and protecting of the Adobe program. And there was a high-profile case against the company that distributed music. And these were second-hand files of the owners, but this company received a multi-million-dollar lawsuit and was constrained to declare bankruptcy. After this lawsuit and these cases, which I will talk about after the break, they have greatly influenced the further development of digital art. Well, in the same period, the relevant acts in Europe were adopted, because Europe has always reacted to everything happening in the United States of America. The Directive of 2001 on the harmonization of certain aspects of copyright and related rights in the information society was adopted. And in many respects, it echoes the norm laid down in the law of the United States of America. But, nevertheless, it does not solve the main problem, which, again, I will probably say after the break, because you may be a little bit tired, and now I will break off. In the second part, we will talk with you about auctions, venues, and online art. So we have a very interesting second part. Therefore, we will not get ahead of events. Oh yes, Marchuk's exhibition was wonderful, thanks. It was really extraordinary. I was lucky enough to meet Marchuk in person. He's an amazing person with amazing energy, very modern, already of respectable age, but nevertheless so advanced that he conducted such an experiment for the first time. Exactly this second part of the exhibition, it seems to me, has greatly increased its success, attendance. It was held again in the art area under the auspices that this is exactly the last time. And the last question is whether photographs, video art, handmade art is an independent work of digital art. Of course, generally, digital art is no different from, let's say, ordinary art, except for certain new problems that arise. It is necessary to prove that the creative contribution of the author is weighty, because we say that the object of copyright must be original, it must be unique, because that is a form that is protected by copyright. Therefore, there is no concept of novelty. It's quite possible to inherit the technique of someone's tradition, someone's school, but nevertheless to create an absolutely original copyright object, just like digital. But the question is how much the author's contribution weighs in order to prove that only this author could create such an object. That is, they contributed their creativity, inspiration here, and it was not just an algorithmic work of the machine, but again, it all depends on each specific case. In our Ukrainian space, there were no such cases yet, and in foreign practice, there were also just a few. But if we are talking about the accomplished author, then it's even easier for him or her to prove the authorship for a work that was created by using technology. It's an additional tool in the author's hands, like a brush or arsenal of some colors, canvas, and so on. All this is necessary in order to create a picture. With the development of digital technology, they have certainly become very complicated. We will also talk about the problems that exist and the features of digital art in the second part, because of course there are a lot of them, because the introduction of digital art has blown away, we might say, the creative world. It has greatly changed the concept of art in general, and also changed a lot mentally. Authenticity, selectivity, elitism of art very often collapses, because digital is a very mass art that is easily replicated, in which there is no concept of a copy, because each work that is a file exists as an original. If in traditional art you can almost always distinguish the original from the copy by using simple tools, and even more so by an expert, in digital art it is already a big problem. Here we will talk about tokenized platforms in the second part, and we are looking for the modern period and a lot of interesting new challenges and problems. Well, in conclusion, we will also talk about what digital art is from a legal standpoint. So we continue. I added cases that I wanted to tell you. They are not related to art, but nevertheless, they have a great impact on the digital art market. So, the first high-profile case was United States versus Alcomsoft and Dmitry Sklarov. And supposedly Dmitry Sklarov invented a technical tool that allowed bypassing copy protection mechanisms of Adobe systems, ebook files. And there was a very high-profile multi-million-dollar case that had been considered in the courts for a long time. And in general, he had to close the company. The first precedent was created for protecting digital versions of books, electronic versions of books, and after that, the Adobe system company received such a monopoly for a very long time and consolidated its position in the market. Then it was a case versus Napster, a well-known company, when the court took the position that transfer of electronic files and distribution of them under the P2P protocol is an illegal distribution of works. That's a allowed case in the field of music, after which a whole company was closed. And another thing, also related to the music industry, a case called Capitol Records versus Redigi. It was also a startup that was associated with the distribution of music, which we may call used. And in fact, we consider this case as exemplary, even for digital art. And this case actually recognized the doctrine of the first sale or exhaustion of rights, which in our jurisdiction is actually not applicable in the digital sphere. But what does it mean? This means that the court ruled that this is a paradigm that when selling a picture, the author does not lose copyright, but cannot influence the further distribution of this material instance, the original of this picture. Which means they cannot prevent its further sale, excluding the resale royalty rights. Only they can receive deductions from each subsequent sale in the amount of 5% by resale royalty right. Nevertheless, they cannot influence who will sell their work on the secondary market to its owner, where they will be exhibiting their physical works. In this sense, the author exhausts their rights. In the digital world, this doesn't work. Because digital art has no material form, and it is impossible to separate the original of it, which embodies the artwork. Each copy is kind of original. Due to the fact that now we still do not have mechanisms to prevent duplication, copying, many artists say, everything that I posted on the internet, I posted for free use. Well, of course, this is the internet, an open network that involves free access. But I can tell you, from the legal standpoint and the freedom of information, yes. Now, from the point of view that people can get acquainted with these works, watch them, study, prepare a presentation like this, telling their lectures for popularization or for scientific purposes. Yes, okay, but it doesn't mean that there are no rules of the game. The rules of the game remain the same. That is, when I show some object, I have to show who is the author of this object and give links to those resources, and they will be in the record, because there is a large list of resources from which I took visual materials for my presentation. And by the way, there were questions and lectures. It doesn't matter, these are webinars, live offline lectures, but the rules of the game remain the same. And even here, the doctrine of free use for non-commercial purposes or educational goals, for the purpose of popularization of certain knowledge, they still do not remove the need to comply with these rules. But once again, I say that if we are talking about the commercial sphere, this whole story is even tightened. And therefore, this case is significant because it actually made it clear to the legal community and market participants that the doctrine of the first sale in America or the doctrine of exhaustion of rights in Europe are not applicable in the digital field. Only if you transfer the file on media, like on a diskette, CD, although this is already happening, but nevertheless, only then it does work. That's roughly speaking with this disk. existing with this original, the new owner can carry out their further actions. The author does not affect this process, but as for the network, as for online, as for the transfer of rights to art that exists in digital form or in a form of a file, the assertion of rights does not occur. Here is such an interesting story, which naturally had its continuation and distribution in the future. And we move on to the next very interesting section of my lecture. This is art online. From around 2010, I would say, there has been a boom in online art marketplaces, and not only in sales. With various manipulations with art, these are online auctions, online galleries, and online confirmation of rights, and art assessment. That is, internet opportunities allow forming an online market, which is becoming very, very successful and powerful. Of course, it's still inferior to the traditional art market, as analyst shows, but nevertheless. So, the first platform in the field of art, ArtNet, was associated with the introduction of the internet, but despite the fact that the company was founded the first time in 1989, and it was even called differently. In fact, this is a network that we know now. It was already founded later. When the German art dealer Hans Neuendorf joined the company, and he invested in his company, which was originally founded by the French collector Pierre Sarnet, and significantly strengthened the development of this platform. It was in 1995 that the company acquired the name ArtNet Worldwide Corporation. Then it will be headed by the son of Neuendorf, and it will begin its development. And to this day, it exists and is a powerful database on the art market as a whole, and not just digital. Although you remember that we are talking with you about art, including traditional digitized art, because it's impossible to imagine anything on the platform without a digitization mechanism. And it is all the same, whether it's a digital copy or photocopy or reproduction, it should be created. Although you understand that quality will not be as it is needed in order to view it on the platform as well, like you view it live in the real world. It was a network that connected all market participants, galleries and artists, allowed them to sell and later even hold auctions. It formed the ArtNet Fine Art base, which is used by world players in the art market, and later it became a partner for the well-known auctions because they scooped up information there, which confirmed ownership of certain objects and their price. Because the database also contemplated a division of ArtNet Art Price, which, based on the study of a huge array of data, which is 10 million auction sales.
That is, in fact, the public sales history was automatically investigated, which allowed to form a value, so that the artist could determine their value, even later without having this public sales history, but simply on the basis of analytics, which compared it with certain analogs, evaluated the genre of the art, and could determine the price. Then it turned into a huge network of galleries, which brought together galleries and collectors all around the globe. There are more than 35,000 artists and more than 2,000 of international galleries. And it is the largest network of its kind, attracting a wide audience and selling analytics. Selling something and distributing something for free, which gives us an idea of the art market in general. And then the well-known Collectrium platform came. It is a platform that combines tools for collecting and managing the collection, more intended for collectors. There is also a mobile version, and it was purchased in 2015 by Christie's auction and continues to work. It also has offices around the world and has been successfully operating up to the present day. In 2010, online platforms grew like mushrooms. The Artsy platform should be well known to you, which works with galleries, is kind of a window for the gallery. It is a platform for searching, buying, and selling fine art. Allows you to contact galleries, and there is no direct sale. You actually see the artwork and you see the price. And on the one hand, they position themselves as trying to be transparent, but on the other hand, all transactions occur outside the public, and you must still contact the gallery. Further, the platform Saatchi Art arose, which also has, just like Artsy, a mobile version, on which the artist himself could already sell his works. And there are both established artists and beginners. There is a blog, there is a newsfeed, online exhibitions are also being created. But how they are created is natural, that an online exhibition is just a section on the website where you can go and see the artworks presented at the exhibition. That is, actually cannot be compared with the experience when you come to the exhibition and look at art live. But despite its development, the rapid technology in general, the rapid development of life, it makes it convenient for many to buy art through online platforms, and they get such a widespread technology. You see two more, it's Paddle and ASCIIMATION, platforms that unfortunately went bankrupt, so I don't think we need to talk about. Although it was actually an attempt to recreate online art auctions, and probably still offline auctions won, because they declared bankruptcy one after another and did not survive to this day. And here is the statistics which suggests that online art is gaining enormous popularity. In general, in 2015, there was a boom in online art, and the growth was recorded as the highest in the entire history of the development of online platforms. This is 24%. Was annual growth for the 2015 year of online art, or art sold online. That is the price range of up to $5,000. Online platforms generally came in second place after gallery sales, ahead of auctions, you can imagine. Of course, if we are talking about an expensive segment, an exclusive segment, then they are stable in the third place, and before quarantine, online, the market certainty did not reach such enormous numbers. It was stable, somewhere around 12% growth a year, and it was assumed that it will grow all the time. And then the COVID happened. And in general, it probably happened that in general, experts, finance specialists, auctioneers, market professionals could not predict. Museums were physically closed, galleries closed, exhibition spaces closed, fairs were not cancelled, and even auctions were forced to reduce staff. And of course, there are no numbers, and it is not known whether they will be showing the results of this year, and whether this event can be indicative. All forecasts were very different and scary. But nevertheless, everyone is talking about the rule of deferred demand. That everything will recover, and in general, the segment will only grow because now everyone has switched to online forcibly. And in the absence of offline experience and the threat of the virus, the global threat. Of course, transportation, logistics, everything has completely changed and made us play according to completely new and different rules of the game, if I may say so. And so here you already see the digital art platform. Since 2011, the digital art platforms appear. So why do I indicate these platforms as digital platforms and not just online ones? Because, I repeat once again that whenever we read the market estimate, somewhere around 9% of online sales were digital, but there were no in-depth studies of the digital market, and you won't find them. Why? Because firstly, it does not have the scale of $64 billion sales of art as a whole. The market for traditional art in general. Online is 12% and 9% of online is digital. But we do not have any further information. Further, such specialized platforms began to produce this information about digital art. I'm not saying that they are widespread, but nevertheless, please note that the main players are represented here. The first such platform was Sedition. There will be a little bit more information about it. This is a platform on which only digital was sold for the first time, and it was sold exclusively. Content was distributed only in digital format and only in the form of limited releases.
What does it mean? This means that each object had a limited edition, that the platform exclusively sold digital art in a limited amount. Call it a copy or an original, but I would call it digital originals of this work. They all do not differ from each other. The only question is the price and the number of these copies. And, interestingly, with each subsequent copy, this object becomes more and more expensive because there remains even less of it. So this is how the law of this market works. But what is still interesting, since this platform was originally contemplated for digital, access to the works was only through the browser. Attention here, this is absolutely in tune with what happened on the music market. When we download music through the App Store, We listen only through the system, through the browser. We do not download it anywhere, neither to the computer nor to the devices. In fact, you can only view, enjoy this art in a browser through the screen. What can be used as a screen is up to your fantasy only. Either it is a TV screen or special projectors or even smartphones. Naturally, there must be a good resolution in order to view this art to the fullest. After that, digital frames appear. Remember how photos could be viewed as small digital frames. And now there are digital frames for viewing art, in which this art can change. Unlike when you hang a picture and only enjoy one image at one time, which can be also annoying. Especially in our time, when everything changes, we have such a clip way of thinking, we always need to change the picture, so digital art is way more interactive and it meets our needs more adequately. Sedition is the first platform which was introduced in 2011. But you need to work with it exclusively. It is very important to understand here, because otherwise they cannot guarantee, if you do not sign the full transfer of rights with them, they cannot guarantee the security of this content. Absolutely understandable, reasonable, justified regime is fully obeying the laws of 2010s. Then the first digital auction appears. In general, I want to tell you that this year, starting with 2015, the digital art market is gaining momentum, and the pace and speed are becoming more and more powerful. Right now, this concentration will increase. The first digital art auction was held by the Philips Auction in collaboration with Tumblr. It is also a browser or a platform in which GIFs are used. So it is like a social network that uses GIF files. This is the first case of selling digital art, when out of 20 submitted works, 16 were sold for a total of more than $90,000. Each work ranged from $100 to $16,000, and this show attracted special attention to digital art. And 20% of Pedal's revenue went to the Rezone platform, which has no commercial purpose. This is a platform that is existing now too. We can also explore. Since 2012, it has been functioning, engaged in the study of digital art, more for social purpose. It is engaged in the scientific research of digital art for the New York-based non-profit organization, which deals with new media. Therefore, we can finish the analysis of the stage. As you might see, it is already starting to break up more finally due to the concentration. That is, we are now considering the period 2010 up to 2016 without including it. The first auction of digital art is taking place here. The first online digital art selling platform has appeared, and online digital art selling platforms are widely spread. Instagram, of course, arises, and artists begin to use it. 70% of millennial artists, millennial collectors, and artists of a new format come there. They put their work on Instagram absolutely open-minded and accordingly advanced through Instagram, because it was also such a chic tool for promotion, a brand new one. If earlier we said that it takes 10 years for an artist to be recognized, now the numbers have significantly decreased, exactly thanks to such opportunities and thanks to digital art. And finally, in the period in 2015, the first platforms of tokenized art appeared. The first such platform, which allows to exchange art for a token, is All Public Art. It still exists. And the second was Scarab. There's access is possible only via VPN for us because the website is American. These are actually the first cases of platforms of tokenized to crypto art. But I leave them in this period because they did not have such a wide distribution. They did not receive such crazy profits as their successors, which have been appeared since 2016. But before that, let's see what happens in legal reality. So, just in this slide, I paid attention to the doctrine of exhaustion of rights, referring already to international treaties and directives, which confirms the fact that exhaustion of rights does not occur on the provision of online services. This explains the fact that there are still no direct sales through online platforms. You should still inquire the gallery. It is simply not possible to buy an artwork with just one button click. There is no transparency of payments. Contracts are not closed by the platform itself, which in general does not solve the problems of the shadow market. So this monopolization of the art market remains. Its division between major players and the problems of logistics are not solved. Anyways, art must be transported, documented, etc. There are a lot of problems, and let's say online platforms do not solve them. In general, what we had in the traditional sphere is simply transferred here. But of course, online and the internet make it possible for artists to globalize much faster, to find their collectors or art lovers from other countries much faster than before. In 2016, the USA adopted the white paper on remixes, first sale and statutory damages, which proclaims that online and digitalization of society in general pose new challenges and problems. But still, this white paper does not solve anything. And this very powerful direction is being formed in America by the lawyers of the new formation, who begin to oppose the existing doctrine of intellectual property, copyright in the digital age. That is, they say that such changes and such displacements of the tectonic layers occur caused by the advent of digital, that copyright can no longer work according to the same rules and should seem to fade into the background. They even advocate for reducing the duration of copyright, for accessibility, for transparency of the market, for its deregulation and democratization. And the last significant milestone on which I would like to dwell today, evaluating the whole path of digital art, is of course blockchain art. The introduction of blockchain technology at one point affected not only the financial market, but also the art market. I want to emphasize once again that you should not personify the blockchain with crypto. These are still not always uniquely related things. Blockchain technology itself is associated with decentralization, with the automation of the inability to influence processes, with transparency, market self-regulation, so it definitely has a positive image. and its appearance significantly influenced both public services and services in various markets. Nevertheless, the attitude towards cryptocurrency is completely different, and we see that it's still being considered as some kind of a soap bubble, like some kind of financial pyramid. And I don't intend to give any expert estimates now, but this is a feeling that it will someday burst, and some element of uncontrollability and risk when the state, with the help of its mechanism as some kind of regulator, simply cannot influence the market. It develops according to its own laws, it cannot forecast prices, and then of course the crypto has such an easy negative flair. And if, let's say, we talk about the American market, then it does not really welcome crypto, so the crypto market generally goes into absolutely parallel reality. And if you want to attract serious investments, for example, if you want to go out with a startup on an IPO, then you definitely can do it if you use crypto and not fiat money, like recognized, legalized ones. But let's talk about everything in order. So, in 2016, an article by Yulia Michalskaya is published, which says that blockchain is a revolutionary technology that will absolutely change or can change the art market altogether. As it has wild potential for improving transparency, copyrights, and property rights as it exists today. It all started with CryptoKitties, as it doesn't sound funny. I don't know if someone does not know this platform or knows it. These are generally kitties that are absolutely unique in the sense they correspond and do not infringe copyright law. They are absolutely original. It is impossible to create a second kitty of the same kind. In fact, it is a game on the blockchain. It is a tokenized art which you can collect and generally breed and sell as kitties. Each kitty is original and belongs to you 100% due to the fact that the token is known. That is, the platform records the owner of the token and accordingly the owner of the kitty. It cannot be reproduced, removed, destroyed. They only pass from one collection to another. Somewhere closer to the game. I don't know if this can be called art. Artists know better. This is more, of course, a game and such kind of crypto art exchange, but even digital assets. We know that for the first time the concept of a digital asset arose in games, as if the follower was the CryptoKitties platform. The next platform that continued the great work of CryptoKitties was the CryptoPunks platform, where these punks existed. It generates them in the pixel art technique. Which is not repeated too. There are three categories, which are available for sale, which are offered for sale, which are bought, and those which are played on the stock exchange, making new bets. Here you see what is being offered for sale. It has a brown background. Blue background means that it was bought. Lilac means that it's been made a new bid. Green is I already forgot what green is, excuse me. In fact, these punks can only be operated on this platform. So this is such a game of collecting. But experts and media publications began to write about them as crypto art platforms.
Given that today we are considering different types of art, maybe this can be attributed to art too. 10,000 of these unique collectible characters are distributed on the platform. The proof of ownership is fixed on the blockchain by using Ethereum or Ether. I wrote here a project that inspired the modern crypto art movement, and it truly was. And the platform that, let's say, most embodied and developed to the climax of this direction is the Super Rare platform, which was released recently. Moreover, how does it differ? It really presents what can be called art. All the same, this art is tokenized. Each one has a unique hash, and the platform captures the owner and all transactions. Their history, the history of these transactions, is recorded by the platform. Accordingly, the price is also recorded. What else does this platform give? It made it possible to invest in art. That is, roughly speaking, several people, if the work is expensive, can purchase individual tokens and invest into an object that will later be sold for a much larger amount and make a profit. You can exchange for regular currency too. Of course, all of these platforms, I want to say right away, are outside the regulatory field. Moreover, if we are talking about investments, then of course it requires certain permissions. Of course, the experience of these platforms is unique, as well as the artworks that are there. They can be evaluated in different ways. And just recently they went ahead and introduced the concept of crypto voxels. This is the so-called galleries, virtual galleries, where you are in a virtual mode and you can walk through the gallery space the way you do it in real life, but only virtually. The quality of these images is absolutely not perfect, to put it mildly. The artistic value of these works is doubtful too. From the point of view of art, it's up to you to evaluate. Rather, it is some kind of new experience, and it is cool. And they allow these galleries to see who walks there and somehow communicate in chat rooms. That is, it gradually grew into a society that fully functions according to the rules of digital reality. These crypto voxels are actually virtual real estate. Each has common borders, they form streets, and such a common space is formed, just like in a game. That experience was borrowed from the game when many users built space in the framework of a virtual world, virtual reality. So how does this platform work? Firstly, it combines the work with a token, which makes it unique. Secondly, it works as a social network using a blockchain. It allows you to sell art, track sales, mark the object of art itself. Moreover, later, it even made it possible to exchange works of art with so-called royalties. That is, payments to the first owner are deducted from the next sale, which is consonant with a royalty mechanism, which works, for example, in copyright. In general, it remains to say who invented this wonderful world. In 2017, 3 people introduced this project to the world, namely John Crane, Charles Crane, and Jonathan Perkins, who is the CEO, CTO, and founder of Pixura,
That is, it was not for nothing that they came to Super Rare, to this crypto world, because they themselves left this world. Further, how is blockchain developing? Now we will return more to the blockchain as technology, and we will talk further. So, in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, the Artory platform emerges. The first platform that allows registration of art objects on the blockchain, which allows you to authenticate an object, trace its origin or provenance, distinguish reliable and unreliable data based on data analysis, and track further sales and transactions. The platform acts in tandem with Christie's auction house and issues a digital certificate for the sale of works of art already worth $300 million. That is, the blockchain technology has replaced a huge number of experts who work, study in the market, killing a huge database and confirming or not confirming it each time with an owner's document. This is where technology does it, respectively. Such platforms are built into the general blockchain environment, and in theory, they form a completely new market that operates according to these rules of the game and which allows solving many problems that were previously problematic with digital art, actually allowing us to examine and operate digital art as a digital asset that you can extend your property, your monopoly on, and operate in the market and, of course, receive income and big profits. Therefore, blockchain technology has greatly influenced that market since 2016. Then there are a few more such signals that occur precisely during this period. I believe that this period can be for sure called the period of the digital art market formation. The first digital art museum appears, in which you can get completely non-transmitted and incomparable experience of interacting with digital. A group of digital artists called Team Lab is engaged in this art, filling the contents of this museum. You can also buy a ticket to this museum, and it's not for nothing, it's $30. I want to tell you, I was in different museums, and this is a pretty expensive ticket. Then, in 2019, the first Kadaf digital art fair appears, and it is one of the very important moments of this period. It is Christie's auction with an artwork created by artificial intelligence. Moreover, when we are talking about some kind of controlled technology, this is a completely self-developing system, which, having studied a huge list of portraits of a certain period of painting, formed such a portrait of Edmond Bellamy and was sold. In terms of, you see, the artistic value here is questionable, even features are blurred, and it was not possible to fully recreate the face. Of course, it can be considered as a certain technique, but nevertheless, it's rather an error in the work of artificial intelligence. But because it was the first precedent, this art was sold for $432,500. That is many times more expensive than its predecessor. And Christie receives the status of the first auction house offering art created by the algorithm.
That is, it was such a PR move of its kind of. But what's interesting is that for us, the story continued.
Худявенький такой портретик, были получены такие деньги, то, конечно же, возникли сразу несколько претендентов на право собственности.
Because when such money was obtained for the portrait, then, of course, several applicants for the right of ownership for copyright arose, and the case came to the court. If you look at the history of creation, then this picture was created by a neural network for which Robbie Barrett, a 19-year-old Stanford University programmer, wrote the code, but the fame went to 3 French students who received this portrait directly by using the code generated by Robbie, but by using their content. And the author of the code was offended that they did not remember him, apparently sharing his money, and went to court, and the court case continued. I will also place a necessary link for you to read about this case, its analysis. The first case, of course, where the court recognized that artificial intelligence cannot be subject of copyright. And the whole question is who invested just the most time and creative efforts to create this portrait. Therefore, the young people who generated the portrait itself got an advantage, not the creator of this neural network. It was a precedent that the creators of the portrait staked out, one might say, copyright. Well, the last case, you are probably tired already. And we still have something to talk about. This is selling this wonderful rose. This is a photograph of a rose on a black background. But what is the trick? It was created by an Irish photographer, the most famous photographer of the Silicon Valley, who shoots generally known personalities, celebrities, public figures on a black background, giving them a certain status. His portraits already cost lots of money, $150,000, depending on whether he sells his work exclusively or not. If you want to buy a portrait with rights, then $350, if, let's say, without rights, but only your images, then it costs $150. So he has also interested in tokenized art, and this is difficult. There is only a digital format. It is tokenized and was sold for $1 million in cryptocurrency, and 10 buyers bought it at once, each of which paid $100,000. And they are the owners of the tokenized part of this wonderful rose. That was the first case. Before that, he also had such hype sales, like here on my banner, which was dedicated to today's event. Potato was used. Well, it's really not by Kevin Abash. I found a similar invention because I thought that he could still, it's not even an hour to sue me, because he's a very savvy person in this sense, very good at valuing his art and commercially successful. That is why before that he sold it in an amazing way of picture of potato for €1 million. I think how and now the rose went and it was sold for cryptocurrency. But what we are talking about now? This is another coin in the piggy bank of digital art, so to speak, which gives us the opportunity to say that the puzzle is slowly developing and the overall picture is visible. That is, the market is really being formed, It's not just digital art as some kind of a research direction. Here first, then some experiments at the intersection of art and technology in general. It is just traditional art that goes digital. And now there is a completely different philosophy of art, which is becoming widespread. If we summarize this period from 2016 up to 2019, and 2020 has not yet been included here, perhaps because we have a kind of a blurry picture so far in connection with what is happening. Yeah, and we are on the verge of a global crisis. That is why I closed this period with 2019. I would like to characterize it with such things. First of all, the development of blockchain and tokenized art. This is a widespread use of crypto art platforms, including crypto voxels and virtual galleries. Then these triggers appear. Digital art museum, a digital art fair, digital asset market emerge, and the digital art market begins to enter. Somewhere on the border with entertainment, somewhere on the verge of the market of digital photography, graphic design, but it begins to occupy a large segment of this market, not yet calculated. So far, to say that the market has already formed, when we can evaluate, calculate, describe, we cannot talk about it yet. That is, we are currently on the eve of these events, but so far it is too early to talk about it. And of course, these are just the biggest high-profile works that have become a kind of a hype. I don't know if it will be said, will it turn into a trend, but nevertheless. What is happening with law here? During this period, a directive on copyright and related rights in the digital single market is adopted. Complementary to the directive we recalled today about copyright in the digital age. Next comes the digitalization of our law, and not only ours. In each jurisdiction there is a digitalization of its law, but this means that from 2015 up to 2017 these are amended accordingly, which are already considering what the digital version is, the electronic version of the work. The concept of digital reproduction appears. It starts to play in a wider palette of colors. The concept of reproduction, including digital, appears not only for the owners of the content, but also for the provider and owner of the website or page, including the social network. And the system works on the blockchain, and in fact, it is the same mechanisms that I described today. Here is what the certificate looks like, which the owner of the file receives. And which proves that he is the owner of it, which means the digital art.
А это значит, что цифровое искусство, цифровые работы с использованием, в том числе и
digital works, including the use of artificial intelligence and virtual reality algorithms,
какие угодно работы, которые могут
any kind of artworks that may exist as a file, they become a digital asset that you can fully operate on. And then, if someone makes an unauthorized copy, but does not have a certificate, it will be a violation. What is new here? On the one hand, it is probably nothing, because as it were, the registration mechanism was. Another thing is that we say that copyright does not need to be registered, as if rights arise from the moment and artwork is created and do not require additional registration. But we are well aware that in some conflicts there will be a need for a proof. So, before that, it was a copyright certificate,
было свидетельство, да, об авторском праве.
The register was a government agency in each country.
В каждой стране потом возникли так называемые
Then, with the introduction of the blockchain, such platforms arose that also were able to record. You send them the work, your data for the work, and it recorded that at the moment of the time you are an author. Now it has become more official. The blockchain has received official status. It's not just WIPO proof, it's kind of WIPO approve in principle. A system for obtaining ownership of a digital file at the level of the World Intellectual Property Organization. The system has already been recognized by such a major player who is shaping the global policy in the field of intellectual property. The service is already available. Just fixing it has a deposit in 20 francs and 40.
Вот я не помню, точно надо посмотреть. И 40, если вы хотите иметь вот этот вот сертификат.
If you want to have a certificate, it costs more, but in principle it is a mechanism by which you can be not afraid to upload your digital art that exists in the internet as a file. And that is easy to duplicate, easy to play, easy to download. It is clear that such a mechanism allows you to protect to some extent. Naturally, we still do not have a judicial practice, evidence-based practice of defending rights in court on the basis of such a mechanism. But, nevertheless, I can tell you that on May 25th of 2020, a rather important event took place. So now let's summarize what in fact distinguishes a digital artwork from an ordinary artwork. Well, firstly, if a traditional artwork we talk about is an object, about the rights themselves, we distinguish copyrights from the ownership of the material object in which it is embodied. In the context of a digital artwork, what is a digital artwork itself? This is to some extent information that exists in electronic digital form, the basis of which is binary code. That is, in fact, in a digital environment, there is a two-level binary image method, where each pixel can be displayed either a zero or unit, or a combination of these numbers. If we talk about the features of digital art, then there are lots of these features which allows us to talk about it as a special asset. The isolation is relative. If in traditional art there is always a link to the medium, there is a picture, there is some kind of sculpture, and so on. Here it is intangible from the beginning. It is a great opportunity for editing. Anyone can change it after all. We know that the copyright exclusively enables only the author to change or transform the work. Here the model completely changes. It is easy to replicate, easy to edit, it can easily disappear right up to its complete removal because of such variability. It is a living organism, gets such properties and interactivity, of course. It is viral in nature. That is, it can spread with high speed without loss of quality, which means its ability to replicate is much greater than it exists in traditional art.
Correspondingly, the boundaries between the original and the copy are erased. Further, regarding viewing and the existence of digital art, it can exist virtually, but it can also be transformed into material form. If you transfer the digital art, there is print, for example, onto some paper or some other object, then it's kind of not a competitor, because what makes it possible to compete. It is a monopolization when we can actually put our paw, we can confirm that monopoly on a specific object. It is very hard to prove a monopoly here. So long as the blockchain has not worked, I can say that it directly solved all the problems, because it can still be duplicated, it can be copied anyway, but there is already an arsenal of legal methods and technical methods with the help of this technology, which nevertheless allows you to already fully operate with digital art as an asset and carry out the transactions. Therefore, non-competitive on the one hand, yes, and almost zero marginal costs, yes. But on the other hand, there are already cases when these laws are broken, when there are cases of very expensive sales of digital art. I cannot say that there are lots of them, but the concentration is increasing, which also means that the market is forming. What are digital copies? Again, I take the copy in quotation marks. That is, in fact, we have the possibility of graphic reproduction. This is facsimile reproduction. It's like from the old school, such an old school mechanism, when just a photocopy is made without recording in electronic form, which is a computer. Electronic digital information. This is just digital information that allows you to reflect or record certain works in this file, отражать или записывать определенное произведение. Именно эти файлы, которые хранятся. It is these files that are stored on computer devices or in database records that can be могут operated on the internet, transferred by transaction from one owner to another, and distributed through the network. How to define a fake if we are talking about digital art? I'm already finalizing. I will tell you honestly that these are problem areas of digital art, but nevertheless, it can be accessible to an expert. Это может быть доступно, да? Например, это определяется с помощью. For instance, this is determined by examining the number of pixels in a graphic file, as well as subsequent reproductions. The file size may decrease, which will affect its quality, although there are some peculiarities that undermine this moment in general. Why? Because there may be same file weight, it's just that the screen resolution is different, and here it's almost impossible to do this, which greatly complicates the process of authentication of digital works. Then you can determine the source, taking into account the type of graphic features. For example, if it exists in PNG or JPEG, then it is most likely sequential, and the primary file was made in a special graphic editor. For example, with some other resolution, depending on the program, whether it was Illustrator or Photoshop in which it was created. Naturally, the owner of the source is the author. With online replication on the web, information about authorship is stored That is, if we are talking about net art or webism, then there is also how you can recognize information about the owner of the site, and you can also find information about the author of the object as it was done on the web. And finally, the last mechanism is a blockchain certificate or a hash of a file that gives a unique number and which changes with each copy. And in fact, the owner of the copy cannot confirm the property without a blockchain certificate. And accordingly, it is reflected in the registry. Therefore, I say that the mechanism works 100%, but there was no lawsuits. But this is definitely the future that will allow the digital market to evolve and protect digital artists from hate. That's all actually. I also want to give a quote from a digital artist, which says that that's all actually. I also want to give a quote from the digital artist, which says that attempts to control copyright on artworks posted on the internet are futile. As soon as the image appeared, which suggests that there are so-called ideologists and opponents of the protection of copyright in digital art in general, who say that as soon as something has appeared on the internet, it is already impossible to protect. But I want to tell you that despite such a kind of romance, the feeling of the future that it will change differs from the traditional art market. Right and the law go towards tightening, towards restrictions, so the law is still trying to protect the author with all its might, regardless of whether he creates the real world or in the virtual, digital one. Thank you for your attention. Write in the comments what other topics you would like to consider, because of course this topic is unlimited, and I will be happy to meet with you again.